The problem is, as I see it, that he's just explicating the phenomenological method, or the phenomenological approach to hermeneutics, to the hermeneutical frame in general. And he does provide like foils or kind of relations between, applications of that phenomenological method that are Christian, that are even done by people who are Orthodox, and those who are not, that are using the same method. But there's nothing in this definition, for example. Orthodoxy in the end is a journey, a way of life mediated through a community in space and time, which symbolically formulates and precisely transmits its experience of truth in a grateful, rational, and faithful way. The history of thought bears witness to two major attempts, philosophical and theological, to further define this experience of truth. And then it gives the philosophical definition of truth, so that's the first, and then the theological definition of truth, second. And so the philosophical leads into the theological, it seems. Or rather, he claims that the philosophical definition, which attempts to kind of situate phenomenologically the experience of the Trinity in the frame of one's experience of reality, such that you can, from the bottom up, from the phenomenology, from the sublinguistic and superlinguistic and linguistic elements that make up who a person is and why they're attracted to the beauty of Orthodoxy, that you're able to articulate that in speech in a way that points to Christ, that without the revelation of Christ, that without the revelation of the Trinity, you wouldn't have anything to point to, even though it was there all the time in the field of our everyday experiences, that it's the case that the truth points Godward, it points towards Christ. And then secondly, so from there, the philosophical and the anthropological are really kind of one and the same. The anthropological is the conditions of the possibility of experience based on who we are and how we experience reality as humans. Where does that ultimately point us towards an explication of what truth is and what it means? Ultimately, the truth is relational. The truth is triune, as he calls it, the unitrinity. And so looks like my video is not. Oh. Okay. I don't know how long. Camera wasn't working. That's okay. It's not a big deal. I have to restart the camera. Affected anything. I don't know how long that was off, but it doesn't matter. My words were still working, I think. But yeah, the dogma of the unitrinity appears as a unique outcome postulated by the human spirit but inaccessible without revelation. What reason postulates when it becomes aware of its own enigma as an absolute spirit in which the self-revelation of the self is exhaustive, that is, in which the self-determination of the predicate is not a non-self imposed from without or some pure idealistic construct, but the I myself, going out of itself into another oneself, in a relationship in which I myself would experience the unity of self to self in a copular being which in turn would have the fullness of personal consciousness. In other words, there is need of a self which is at the same time being and logos, a logos which is simultaneously self and being, and all this within the unity of a soul self-affirmation of the self. So this is a kind of Trinitarian understanding of the human person in the image of the Godhead, and that all of reality entails a kind of a self in relation to the self, as oneself in a unity that kind of places boundaries around kind of an infinite multiplicity that kind of evaporates into nothingness. That like the way in which the self relates to itself like has its own logic, its own logos, and you cannot collapse the self, like the conscious self, into the logos. Like they're distinct parts that work together in order to produce a whole that images God, but that you wouldn't even notice in yourself if it weren't for the divine revelation of the Trinity. Or rather, you'd only be able to notice parts or like shadows of it. But then all of reality begins to unfold in a Trinitarian way before your eyes. Both the understanding of one's own self, one's own conscious awareness, but also that of everything. Everything in reality begins to, from the phenomenological frame, the hermeneutical frame that Christianity provides, all of reality begins to mirror or be an expression of the creativity of the God that is triune. And so moving from that kind of anthropological or phenomenological frame and kind of situating of the human person, when understood in this way, one is able to move on to a theological definition. It is therefore at once the narrative of the various representations that its faithful make of God, and of the coexistence within it of often different representations of the world, and of the expression of the degrees of communion existing among its faithful. And so truth, he really puts the emphasis on the philosophical definition of truth pointing to the church. But there isn't much. There's truth as a person. So like, I guess beyond just the explication of one's own personhood, like the anthropology of a human being as triune, like the theological definition of truth is intensely personal in Orthodoxy, which is a genuine distinction between Orthodoxy and everything else. And I know he mentions that Catholics and Protestants, and they all hold in common a belief in the personal nature of truth, that Christ is a person and he is the way, the truth, and the life. One difference that I've seen that is significant between Big O Orthodoxy, which he doesn't want to use because he's attempting to initiate you into his own linguistic framing of things in order to reveal some aspects of reality, but also to get you hopelessly muddled in some other respects. But anyway, the genuinely distinctive nature of specifically Orthodox Christianity, like Eastern Orthodox Christianity, is that worship is personal all the way down. The candles are personal, they're prayers. The Eucharist is an embodiment of a person, like a body, in the altar and the nave, in the heaven and earth meeting, and everything we're learning about the church and about the liturgical life of the church, to the extent that you live in it, reinforces and deepens your awareness of the inherently personal nature of all of reality, and that the personal nature of all of reality actually is something that extends from beyond being. It's in God Himself. He is the fount of personhood, of personality. And so I don't understand why, still don't understand why he's not going to use Big O Orthodoxy to describe Eastern Orthodoxy, because it's clearly the tradition of Christianity that has held on to most fully and completely the personal nature of Christ, as a union of heaven and earth, and that the union of heaven and earth truly is what makes a person, logos and spirit. That you can't be a person, you can't be a true hypostasis without experiencing the union of heaven and earth within yourself at every level of your being. Anyway, it's past my bedtime, and I'm probably rambling incoherently at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream.